Hello guys, it's Uchiales here again and welcome to this course where we'll be looking at adjustment layers. Now, adjustment layers in Photoshop are a group of super useful and non-destructive image editing tools that helps us to add color and add tonal adjustments to our images that we want to use for our design. Now, this becomes important we understand or master the use of adjustment layers because all throughout our journey in the graphic design industry, we'll be making use of images or pictures for our design. In fact, 99.9% of the time, we'll be making use of images to tell our story or pass our messages across through our design. So it's important we understand how to edit these images we'll be using so that they can, pass the correct message that we want them to pass. Sometimes we might come across images that do not have the right color balance that we want to use for our design. The adjustment layers is what you use to correct this color balance. Sometimes you can see images that are too dark for what you want to use. It is the adjustment layer that you can use to brighten up this image. All right. So the adjustment layer is really important. In fact, it plays an important role in your journey as a graphic designer. It's one of the reasons why Photoshop stands out, because Photoshop has this tool called the adjustment layer that you can use to work on images, adjust several properties of the images so that we can use them, or the properties of the images fit what we want to use the images for in our designs. So let's get right into it. There are two ways we can access the adjustment layers. It's either by going to this top here. On the top menu here, you can see image here. By clicking on the image, you can scroll down and see it here, the adjustments. So you can see the adjustment layers, several of them. Then aside from this place, the other place you can get access to the adjustment layers is by the bottom here. At the bottom here, you can see this circle that is half white and half black. Once you click on it, it pops up the adjustment layers. Now, the adjustment layers are grouped into 4, as you can see here, and you can see the 4 groups are separated by lines, as you can notice. So the first part of the adjustment layers, which are just basically 1, 2, 3, they just have 3 adjustment layers there. They are called the fills, FILLS. So here we have solid color, we have gradient, we have pattern. With these 3 adjustment layers, we can fill our images with color. That's this top one, that is solid color. We can fill our images with gradient. We've talked about gradient before, so you know what a gradient is: a blend of 2 or more colors together. Then we can fill our image with patterns. Then also we have the second group, which is luminosity. We use this second group to adjust the luminosity of an image. So here we have brightness and contrast, we have the levels, we have the curves, we have the exposure. These 3, we use it to take care of the luminosity of the image we want to use for our design. So here we have the third group, which is the color group. And just as its name says, color, we use these adjustment layers here to adjust the colors of our image, to play around with the colors. We have the vibrance. You can adjust the vibrance of the image, of the vibrance of the colors in the image. Then the hue and saturation, the color balance, black and white, photo filter, channel mixer, color lookup. So we use these adjustment layers here in this group to adjust the colors of our image. Then we have the last group, which is the effects group. We have 5 tools in the effects group. So these 5 tools are just to use to add effects to our images. So now that I've given you a brief explanation of how the adjustment layers work and what we use them for, let's quickly upload an image into our Photoshop and play around with these adjustment layers. So here is, so let's bring in this image. You know how we brought this image in? I just dragged and dropped the image. Then I'm now expanding it so that it can fill up our artboard. So now we have our image here in Photoshop. Let's say we have this image to use. The lady is wearing a yellow sleeveless. Should I call this yellow or orange? Yeah, I think it's orange. An orange sleeveless top and a matching eyeglass. But let's say because of the color or the color palette of our design, we need a red top. So we want to change the color of the top this lady is wearing. That means we have to go to the adjustment layer and adjust the color property of the clothes she's wearing. So we head to the bottom of these icons here, the bottom of the page, the bottom of the software, Photoshop. At the bottom right here, we see this round icon here that have half of it white and half of it black. Once you click on it, it brings in the color adjustment, the adjustment layers. And you remember the group of the adjustment layers that we said that we use for color corrections or color manipulation. It is this third group here. So what we have to do now is to go to the particular tool in this group that can take care of that color adjustment, and it is the hue and saturation. So I click on the hue and saturation. It instantly pops up the panel where we can adjust the several properties of the color in this image. So the first slider here, it allows us to adjust colors. Then the second slider is titled saturation. It allows us to adjust the saturation of the color we finally pick or finally choose. By saturation, we mean the intensity of that color. So here, the third one is the lightness. It allows us to adjust the lightness of the color. So most of the time, you don't really need to, stress yourself of where you must put, or maybe where you should turn the values to of each of these sliders. Simply, all you need to do is to play around with them. All right, this first slider for hue, just move it, and as you move it, keep looking at the images. You see the color of the image is changing, right? Yeah, it's now green. Yeah, it's now blue. Yes. So you see how we have adjusted the color of this image by moving this slider to the desired point. So while we are moving the slider, we keep looking at the image until we get what we want. We want it to be red, right? At the end of the day, we have red here. Let me move it more. So I can adjust the saturation here. Now the cloth is now more of red than orange, which it was before. So I can adjust the saturation, can make it lighter. Okay, can adjust the saturation, make it a little bit pale, or can make it, can increase the color intensity. So let's close this by clicking this arrow here. So one other beautiful thing about adjustment layers is the fact that each of the layers come with a mask, the layer mask. And if you remember what we do with layer masks, we use layer masks to hide certain parts of the images we don't want to apply a certain effect on. So what do I mean by this? If you remember, as we are applying this hue and saturation layer on the image, the color of the skin also changed. But maybe we don't want the color of the skin to change. Or maybe we don't want the color of the eyeglass to change, right? We just only want the color of the sleeveless top to change. What do? We just go click on the thumbnail for the layer mask that is white, this white thumbnail here. Then we'll go to the brush tool, click on the brush tool, or we click B on our keyboard. Then you see our cursor has changed to the brush tool. So we just have to lower it, not lower, reduce the size, sorry. We have to reduce the size of our brush tool. Then you remember what we said about our brush tool? When the black here is at the foreground, that means we are telling the brush tool, or we are telling the layer mask to hide an effect. But when white is at the top, we are telling the layer mask to reveal an effect. So for this, we are trying to hide the effect on the eyeglass and not to reveal the effect. So black needs to be at the top. So we get straight to, let's zoom in a little bit by holding Control and plus key. Let's slide to the eyes so we can have a better view of what we are doing. So our layer mask is, the color here is black, right? So we are trying to hide the effect on the eyes. So I'm now double clicking on my mouse and I am now applying my brush. I'm painting my brush gradually on the eyeglass. And if you notice, the eyeglass is now turning back. The colors on the eyeglass is changing back to what it was before we applied the adjustment layer. So it's no longer red, it's now orange. Let me apply it on here too. So it can also, let's say, okay, let me zoom out. Let's see how that looks. You see how it looks? It is no longer red. You can also apply this to the skin of the lady, or to really see the effect. Let's change the color from red maybe to something blue. So you can always go back to the adjustment layer, just as we did. You can go back to the hue and saturation layer or any other adjustment layer you choose, click on it, and the panel pops up again for you to adjust the properties again. That is one of the beautiful things about adjustment layers. They are non-destructive, which means you can always go back to them and adjust the changes you have made before. Probably we use red and later we want to make it blue because we don't like red again. Maybe you can change your mind later at the end of the design from where you started from. So you easily go back and make adjustments to your design. And as you noticed, whatever changes we are making is no longer affecting the eyeglass. The color of the eyeglass is remaining constant. All right. So while the whole body changes to blue, the color of the eyeglass remains where it has always been. That is because we have actually used the layer mask to hide the effect on this area of our image. So you see how flexible and how it is to make use of the adjustment layers. So we can still go ahead. Let me click on the layer mask. We can still go ahead and apply this. Let me increase the size of our brush by hitting the square bracket, the right square bracket on my keyboard. So I can go ahead and remove this effect from the head of this lady. All right, so the effect will only be on the body and not the head. So let's go back to the adjustment layer, the hue saturation, and try to adjust the colors. So you see, the color does no longer apply to the head, it only applies to the body now. And that is so amazing. Then we can also choose to delete the adjustment layer if we don't want, or the hue saturation layer, by just double clicking and dragging down to the delete icon by the bottom right, and it's gone. We still have our original image sitting down here looking at us. So this edit, or this edit is non-destructive. It does not permanently change our original image. We can always come back to our original image if we don't like what we have done. We can delete it, or we can choose something else. So let's go back to the adjustment layer. Let's go to the um, black and white. Let's say we want to turn this image to black and white, right? You can just click on the black and white, and now this image is now black and white. Let me change my cursor to move tool. This image is now black and white, but then we can adjust the different properties of the image. The reds of the image, the yellows, the greens, the cyans, and the blues. Images are made up of several colors, right? We have, let me hide the visibility of this. If you look at these images, the colors of this image are made up of several colors, made up of some shades of reds, yellows, orange, blues, and cyan. So this adjustment layer, which is black and white, we can always adjust these different properties of the image, despite the fact that we have turned it to black and white. So this is what I mean. We can adjust this slider to adjust the reds of the image. So somehow it makes this our image a little bit darker. Then you can adjust the yellows. So this green does not have much effect on the image because no part of the image is green. So if there were a green part of the image, you see that this green slider would have affected that green part. Then also don't have the cyan part, so there's nothing much. This blue too will not have an effect on this because no part of this image is blue. Look at it now. No part of the image is blue. We don't have cyan too. We don't have green. So most of the color of that is originally on this image are derived from red and yellow. That is why you see that majorly what affected the image is the red and yellow sliders. So this is simple. This is very simple to use. You keep adjusting these properties until you get what you want. All right. So these are really cool tools we can use in Photoshop. And let's say you turn this image to black and white, yeah, and eventually, but you want the lips to remain, or you still want a part of the image to retain its color. You can just simply use the brush tool. Remember, our layer panel, our layer mask panel is here. So let me read the size of the brush. Let me zoom in. I want to remove this effect, the black and white effect from the eyes, from the eyeglass. So I just paint over the eyeglass, right? So you have to do this carefully so that your brush does not go out, your painting does not go outside the frame of the eyeglass. If it goes outside the frame of the eyeglass, it will not look cool. So to make it more precise, you just really have to zoom in more than this even, so that you can get the accurate frame of the eyeglass. So let's zoom out and see how this turns out. You see, this is really cool. It has even added a new feel and effect to our image that we want to use for our design. So I know probably you must have come across several images with this kind of effect where part of the images have different color and one section has a different color. So this is how these designers get these things done. So mastering the use of adjustment layers can be what makes the difference between an amateur designer and a professional designer, because you'll be making use of images all the time. So knowing how to make use of these adjustment layers will help you to edit your images professionally, and helps you also make your design stand out. One other beautiful thing about adjustment layers is that they are stackable. By being stackable, I mean you can use multiple of them. You must not use just one. You can use a lot of adjustment layers. Now let me show you what I mean. Let's go to the adjustment layers and to the first one, the fill category or the fill group. Let's say I want to fill this with a color. Let me say like blue. Okay, this is black, so let's go to blue. So I've chosen blue, right? Using my color picker tool to choose blue, and I click OK. So I have filled the entire image with blue, and I can use the blend modes to blend this blue together with the image. So I'll click on this blend mode and keep hovering my cursor on any of the blend modes until I get what I want, right? So I really like this. Seriously, I love this. So you see how we have used another adjustment layer to add even another effect on our image. So this is really, really, really cool. So we have our blues everywhere, but even on our background, but we don't want our background to be bluish. We want our background to remain white. So we can just come again to the layer mask, pick up our brush tool, make sure that we have the black at the top so that we can then increase our the size of our brush, and we paint on the background. So you see, as we paint on the background, we are hiding that blue feel over the background. So isn't this amazing? Yes, it is. So let's say we change our mind. We don't want to apply a blue fill on the image anymore. We prefer a red fill. Just simply go to the thumbnail of the blue fill, click on it, and choose another color, red. Here we go. So you can adjust it to whatever you want. You can always come back to it. That's how amazing it is. You can always come back to it. Then at the end of the day, probably I want to add another I want to adjust the luminosity, right? And I choose to adjust the brightness. I can come over, I can choose the brightness adjustment layer. Then its lights open up and I adjust the brightness. All right. So you see our image is now a whole lot much more brighter. I can also adjust the contrast. Okay. So you see how we have used several adjustment layers to to work on our image and to achieve a particular effect and feel for our image. So mastering the adjustment layers is really, really, really important to your journey as a graphic designer or a designer generally. So being good at it is one of the things that makes you a professional. because two designers can use one image to work or to make a design. And you see, one image will look so amazing and have a professional feel and touch, while the other one doesn't. And the use of adjustment layer is the simple tool that makes this difference. So when it comes to this effect, so you can see how this, let's go back there again. I use the invert tool in the effects category, right? So can quickly maybe shut down the visibility anytime. So you can just go through any of them, just play around with them, practice with them, a lot of them, and you see how these things work. We can shut down the visibility of all of them. So, and here we have our original image back looking at us. So you see how amazing this tool is. This is really, really, really cool. So far we have seen that we can use the adjustment layers to, adjust the properties of our images, the luminosity, the colors, and also add several effects to our images that we want to use for our design. Another place we use the adjustment layers in our design is where we want to balance colors between several images. When you're designing a poster or an event flyer where you have several speakers, maybe like 6 speakers or 10 speakers or even two speakers, most of the time the color or the luminosity of each of these images that are being given to you by your client might not be the same, because the two images were not shot by the same camera. They were shot by different cameras, by different photographers before they were sent to you. All right. So most of the time you have to correct their colors and correct the two pictures, their luminosity, so that they can be the same. It doesn't make sense to use two or more images that have their different tones, luminosity, or brightness for your design. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't look professional at all. So most of the time you want to use, you don't have to balance the colors and brightness of each of these images so that they'll be similar before you use them for your design. So the adjustment layers helps you achieve that. Or even if you don't understand what I'm saying right now, in the subsequent courses where we'll be designing, where we'll be carrying out designs, we'll be using our adjustment layers to show you how we balance colors between several images so that you really understand what I'm trying to say. So this course serves as a brief introduction to the adjustment layers and for you to see how it works and it's important to you as a graphic designer. So subsequently in our courses, we'll be making good use of them. So while we make use of them, it won't sound, very, very new, because you have already seen how it works. So let me show you a few examples of designs where adjustment layers were used to, implement a particular effect on the graphic design. So see here, see this poster design right here. The adjustment layers were used here. All right. If you look, basically this image is made up of, if you look at the colors in the image, they basically have two colors, the red and the yellow. So they fill this color with a gradient. They use a gradient fill or a gradient fill on this design. That is why you see some parts have yellow and some parts have red. In fact, the particular adjustment tool that was used, let me show you. See it here. Let's go to the adjustment layers, and it is the gradient map. In fact, let's try it on this particular image so that you see what I mean. So this is our gradient editor. I go to this slider here, I double click on it and I choose red. Okay, then I go to this other part here that is white, I double click on it and I choose yellow. I look for a yellow. Yes. Let me look for So you see, this works almost. Let's go back to that image that I just showed you. So this works like the image here. And what the gradient map tool does is, you know what you talked about gradient, right? Gradient blends two or more colors together to work as one. But here, the gradient map tool on the adjustment layer, what it does is it separates your image into two. The image has Your image has the dark side and the light side, all right? The dark side, like the hair, other places that have shadow, and the light side, that the white sides and other side that have lighter colors. So what it does is, the two colors you select for your gradient, it uses one color and replaces all the dark parts of the image and uses the other color to replace all the bright side of the image. And in this case, it used red for all the dark parts of the image. Like if you see the hair, the eyelash, the shadow parts, the inside of the mouth, at the neck, all these places that have shadows, it replaces it with one of the colors, which is red. And the other places that has lighter color, like the forehead, the skin, the shirt, the background, which is white, it replaces it with yellow. So if you want to reverse this, fine, you can actually reverse it if you want to. And look at this, is how the reverse looks like. All right, so by reversing it, the places that used to have red will not have yellow, the places that used to have yellow will not have red. So this is how the gradient map tool works, and that is what the designer used here for the design. He used reds and yellow. And let's look at another example. So this is a sports flyer design where the designer used the black and white adjustment layer. It turned the image to black and white, but then the designer used the layer mask to remove the effect, the black and white effect, from the clothes of the young man. Then we now have black and white on his body, and while his shirt is retaining the color. So you see how these effects are used in design. Let's look at another example. Look at this example as well. Here the designer used two adjustment layers. For the hair, the designer used the gradient map, and for the body, the designer used the black and white. So we are having two different adjustment layers being used here on the image, on the lady's image. So we have seen how we use adjustment layers in graphic design to correct colors, balance colors, add effects on our images that we want to use for our design. So, and that's that for this course. As an activity for this course, you have to use any image of your choice, upload any image of your choice to Photoshop, go to the adjustment layers, and play around with the image. Use any of the adjustment layers, to work on the images. Just be creative, play around. There's no rules here. Just play around with each of the adjustment layers on the image. See how they work. And at the end of the day, when you are satisfied with what you have done, you submit it. Show me the before of the image and the after of the image. By that I mean, you have to drop two images. The first one is before you added the effect, when it was looking like this, and the second one is after you have added the effect. So that's that for this course. See you in the next one.